There's no doubt that internal comms as a profession has come a long way over the past couple of decades. From being practically non existent in most organisations through to now being considered an essential function, internal comms has risen through the ranks and is no longer considered the poor cousin of external comms, in most places at least. But a recent report from the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence and Haiilo has found that while our confidence might have grown, there's still a long way to go, especially when it comes to having a seat at the executive decision-making table. So in today's episode, I'm unpacking the report in more detail with its author, Sia Papageorgiou, to understand the key findings and what we can do to address them. Sia is the managing partner of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence and a multi-award winner with national and international recognition. She is also a certified strategic communication management professional, a fellow of the Royal Society for Encouragement of Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce, and past president of IABC Victoria. She is also a past board director at IABC Asia Pacific and past chair of the Global Communications Certification Council. And honestly, that's just the highlights. Overall, what I love about Sia is her dogged focus on building the strategic mindset and skill set of communicators, so our profession becomes consistently valued by business leaders. We cover that topic in today's chat as we talk through some of the key findings of the Strategic Internal Comms Overcoming Challenges and Demonstrating Value report the CSCE undertook in partnership with Haiilo, and that report is linked in the show notes. I highly recommend you give it a read. And as you'll hear, there is so much all of us can learn from Sia. So let's get into it. Sia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mel. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on. I've been fangirling from afar for a while. But for those of our listeners who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you came to establish your expertise in that space?
Sure. So I am a strategic communication consultant, trainer and coach. I've been working in communication for almost 30 years. I am the managing partner at the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence. I am ferociously passionate about the value of strategic communication as a force for good in society, and I am on a mission to elevate the value and visibility of communication professionals and help them become trusted, strategic and in-demand advisors, because I believe communication professionals have the best job in the world.
Oh, I love it. And why is it the best job in the world?
Because there is no other function in an organisation that has such an all-access part of the business. I think we're in a very privileged position. We have the ability to build relationships and network with everyone across the organisation. And as I said, I just don't think there is anyone else in such a privileged position. And I love what we do. We tell stories and we influence, we build understanding, we change behaviours. How many people can say they do that in their jobs?
Yeah, I love it. And how did you get into communications in the first place?
Well, I studied communication at university. I gained my bachelor's degree and then I started working in broadcast journalism. I did that for about 6 years, and then I did what a lot of Aussies do, pack up and move to London.
Yeah, I did that.
I did that for a couple of years and I worked in public relations. I really liked that. And then I came home, found myself without a job, and did some temp work at the Australian Taxation Office, which I never thought I'd use those two things in the same sentence. But anyway, I worked there for, only supposed to be for 2 weeks. I stayed 12 and a half years and I had a wonderful career in internal communication there and fell in love with internal comms.
Oh, awesome. And it's one of the things I've talked about a bit on this podcast before and on LinkedIn is the evolution of internal comms as its own specialization. Like when I first started out, there was actually no such thing as internal comms, really. It was a lot of externos coming in doing media relations and that sort of stuff. But it's really become such an integral part of most businesses. And it's used to also, I think, be seen as a bit of the poor cousin of external comms, but even that has changed significantly. So thanks to people like you, trailblazing. So tell us a bit about the CSCE. How was it formed? What's the purpose of it?
Sure. So the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, or the CSCE as we call it, was established 10 years ago. And we're a global professional development and insights organisation. And our mission is really to build strategic communication excellence in individuals, in organisations, and the global community. So we're all about strategic communication and the value of strategic communication to not only organisations, to individuals who work in the organisations, including leadership, but to society as a whole. And we help people in three ways. We teach strategic communication skills. So we run training programs all over the world, helping build those capabilities in individuals, in leaders, and across the organization. We are also a membership organization. So we have a range of memberships for individual practitioners, for executives, and for communication teams. And we provide them with global access to experts around the world, thought leaders and other experienced professionals. And we help communication professionals thrive in their roles. So we provide insights, toolkits, other resources to help them grow and learn in their roles and become more strategic about what it is that they do.
Mm. And I love that one of the things you offer is that certification, because in so many other professions, we see that certification is a part of what makes you credible as a professional as well. How do you think that's going and getting that message across?
Look, slowly but surely, it is a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes, because there's still very much a view of, well, what's the value of a certification? What's it going to do for me? I'm already really good at my job. But here's the thing, Mel, and I know that you think the same way. If we don't respect our profession, why should anybody else?
Mm.
And a certification signals to anybody who's not a communication professional that what we do matters, that what we do is we're in a serious business. It's not just a matter of anybody can do communication. We are skilled in what we do. We are strategic about it. We are purposeful in our approach. We have a global body of knowledge. We have ethics. We have a strong purpose. That's what certification signals. And so I'm a very passionate advocate of certification. And as you know, we have recently teamed up with a Global Communication Certification Council, which I'm the former chair, to provide exam prep, training, and resources to help communication professionals gain their certification. So to any of your listeners who want or are interested in learning more about certification, please reach out. I'd love to help you get certified.
And I can back that up. Sia has been wonderful help, and actually all the resources are there to really, they're there to help you get your certification. It's really, really brilliant. So thank you for sharing that. Now, recently, the CSCE teamed up with Haiilo to undertake some research into overcoming the challenges and demonstrating the value of strategic internal comms, which is really what I want to delve into in this conversation today. So how did this research topic come about?
Well, I'm a bit of a natural-born collaborator, Mel, and I love to connect with like-minded individuals and organisations. And Haiilo actually contacted me and invited me to collaborate on a piece of research. And given, I am a bit of a research nerd, and I live and breathe the W. Edwards Deming quote that goes, "Without data, you're just another person with an opinion." And so I love to do research. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's collaborate on a piece of research. And they said to me, well, what topic do you think we should look into? And I said, why don't we look into what's preventing internal communication professionals from being more strategic about what they do? And this is something that I have a lot of conversations about in my training.
Yeah, I agree. And it's definitely one of those things I'm still educating people on. What's the difference between a strategy and a plan, for example? They're different things. So what were some of the key positive highlights? Let's start with the good stuff that came out of that report.
Well, so I can count the positives on one hand. Okay, let's start with confidence. So confidence in embracing a strategic approach to internal communication was high. And so I think it was just over 70% of respondents said they were either very or extremely confident in taking a strategic approach to their internal communication. Likewise, their self-assessment of their skill level, so their strategic internal communication skills, was also high, and 2/3 of respondents said they had either excellent or very good skills. But here's my question. Why aren't we taking a strategic approach to our internal communication right from the beginning? Why do you have to have, 10 years of experience before you start to act strategic? This is the sort of things we should be teaching the next generation of communication professionals how to do right from the beginning. Now, it's good to be confident. That's a good positive, and it's good to believe that you have the right skills. But clearly, that confidence and competence is not translating to results, given what we learned through the survey. So, things around the barriers that are preventing internal communication professionals from being strategic. Why aren't they demonstrating value? How do they get leadership buy-in? So that is obviously still a problem. The third sort of positive that I wanted to share was an understanding of the impact of strategic communication, internal communication on the organization. So there was some good insights around what's the value of strategic internal communication to the organization. So things like contributing to a positive employee experience, contributing to key business outcomes, creating a culture of inclusion, trust and openness, that type of thing.
Okay. So that's some good things, but I was reading through the report, obviously, before this interview, and it saddened me to read that only a small percentage of respondents said they felt their work in strategic internal comms was recognised and valued by top management. Why do you think this is still the case?
Well, that was something that saddened me as well, I must admit. And I think that's the case because we don't act like business people. We act like internal communication professionals. We act like comms people. Now, when it comes to leaders, I don't know about your experience, but I've never met a leader who doesn't understand the value of good communication. So in my view, any exec with a functioning brain knows that communication matters in an organization. You are there to help the business succeed. So build your business acumen. You also need to demonstrate the value of what you do by measuring what matters. And it's not enough just to measure what matters. You also need to link that to a business benefit by quantifying that value. How many internal communication professionals, when they are asked about the value of what they do, articulate it in business terms? We tend to focus on our activity, but I keep telling people, stop focusing on what you do, stop focusing on your communication activity, and start focusing on why you do what you do. Why are you there? Are you there to increase knowledge? Are you there to build understanding? Are you there to change perceptions? Are you there to change behaviors? That's the powerful stuff. That's the stuff that can help you then demonstrate a link back to the organization's bottom line. And we don't do that enough. So articulating your value in those terms is really important. And building relationships. We don't do enough relationship building. Communication is all around building relationships. You want to have influence, you need to build trust. Trust builds influence. Influence opens doors. So if you want the executive and other leaders and other business partners across the organization to listen to what you're saying, recommending, then you need to build trust with them.
I love that. Yeah. So it's about understanding your contribution to the business goals. And I think that's a big thing. And business acumen is such a key skill that, I think you're right. People get wrapped up in the tactics and the engagement stats and all that sort of stuff, which is, has its place, but again, doesn't demonstrate to the powers that be within a business that you've got a strategic mind that can help the business achieve its goals. And I think that's such a huge thing. So, I mean, that seems very, it's a big needle to shift. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Through the survey, you would have read this when you read the report. There seems to be a very limited view on what strategic internal communication actually is. So how are we acting strategically if we don't actually understand what it means to be strategic? And so you would have read in the report that one of the things we asked people was to articulate in their own words what they thought strategic internal communication actually was. And it seems that the view is quite limited. There were, around 30% of people who actually could articulate in their own words what it means to be a strategic internal communication professional. So, or rather what strategic internal communication was. So if we don't actually understand it, how can we actually enact it in the organization?
Yeah. And absolutely right. That relationships piece as well, even if you ever decide to go out on your own, like you and I have done, none of that's possible without having built really good relationships over the years. So it's not just about what it gets you in the short term, but what does that set you up for long term as well as your own professional, personal goals? Yeah, it's really hard to achieve that if you haven't built any relationships and maintained them and been able to demonstrate your value to people that they would recommend you and advocate for you within a business or external to the business as well. What are some of the other challenges that the report highlighted and how do you think we should address them? So, for example, one of the things that came through was that most of the time is spent on tactical work, not strategic, and very few are involved in decision-making at that strategic level.
Yeah, that was a bit of an eye opener, that question around when our internal communication professionals engaged, and sadly, the results indicate that only 9% of internal communication professionals are engaged during the decision-making process. So the majority are, either engaged during the planning phase or during the development phase or right before implementation. So, everybody's done all the important work. The rest of the business has done the important work, and then they hand it over to communication and say, now it's your turn, go ahead.
Execute.
Yeah, execute. So that's an important eye opener. The barriers, if you look at what people are struggling with the most, it's calculating ROI. It's measuring what matters. It's gaining leadership buy-in. It's planning their measurement approach. All the things that we should be doing in order to become more strategic. And we tend to, when asked, well, what's preventing you from doing that? Time and resources. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, Mel. Sorry, I don't buy that argument. I'm sorry. I have myself many times been a team of one.
Mm-hmm.
I have always invested in building the right relationships. I have always started with a strategy. I have always gotten to work finding out everything I can about the business and my audience. So I'm the only person in comms is not an argument. You want to be strategic, you need to act it. Okay, you need to be disciplined and deliberate about your approach. So, the calculating ROI one and the defining measurable objective. So it's all wrapped around measurement. So if you don't know how to measure, go out and get skilled, attend a course. There's a ton of information out there that can help you become more strategic.
Google it. It's actually, so say even learning itself doesn't have to be a formal paid thing. There's podcast episodes, there's books, there's online articles. There's so many people who you could just tap on the shoulder and have a chat to. And I think part of it, as you say, is I don't know how to measure, but also people who are measuring, how do they then present that up to the C-suite and show them the measures that make sense for them, that actually influence them and actually demonstrate your value? So just putting up, that 60 people read this intranet post, who cares? It didn't.
That's right.
How does that align with a business goal? So it's taking it that next step too, I think, and actually, okay, then what do you do with that measurement? A, to improve your own practices, but B, to influence the powers that be.
Yes. And so what most people do is when they ask to, share their results, provide senior leaders and other business partners with a report card of their activity. So a laundry list of everything they've ever done instead of dashboard of results. So, senior leaders want results. What does that mean to the audience? What does that mean to the human receivers of your communication? Our employees, our leaders, and by extension, any other business partners and stakeholders that have a stake in that communication. That's the value of what you do. That's what you need to focus on. And then, as I said before, taking that a step further and saying, well, that work has then meant I saved the organization this much time, or I saved the organization this much money, or I did this, whatever the case may be. But that's the part that we're not getting right. And then complain that leaders don't value what we do. Well, I'm surprised they don't value what you do, because you're not focusing on the right things.
That's it. What's the impact? Yeah, not just what's the output. And that's a massive distinction. Were there any other sort of key takeaways for you in terms of the things that we could be really focusing on if we're going to keep evolving our profession and getting it to a more valued point?
Look, most of the stuff we've already talked about. I think we just need to be a little bit more disciplined about doing things like strategic planning. Strategic planning, strategic thinking around your internal communication. It's not a nice to have. It's absolutely essential. And here's the secret. It's going to save you time later. Like we tend to think, oh, well, I don't have time to do that, or measurement. if you are acting strategically, you are planning your measures up front. So before you've communicated, you understand how you're going to measure your progress. But the problem is because we're so tactically focused and we go straight into solution mode when we're presented with a problem, we don't take stock of, what it is that we could actually be doing here and what's our objective here. What does success look like from an internal communication perspective?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And I think too, this all, as you say, ties into demonstrating your value as well. Then we go through a restructure and whose head is first on the chopping block. And, if you can't demonstrate that you can add value to an organization, if they just see you as a nice to have because you're pushing out pretty posts and doing that sort of stuff, well, of course, you're not going to be, low down the list, so to speak. So
Absolutely.
it's self-preservation if nothing else.
It is. And I think there are a lot of things, and there's a couple of key recommendations I made in the report around doing things like focusing on your professional development. You have to be relentless about your professional development. The best communication professionals focus on continuous development. Nobody knows everything. We have to up our knowledge about the organization, about its stakeholders, about its external operations. Just because you work internally doesn't mean that you can't build your business acumen about what happens outside the organization, about your key stakeholders, about your employees, about leaders in the organization, about your own skill set. Things are changing. Look at, artificial intelligence, the way we're using artificial intelligence right now, which was another area we looked into in the report. And there are a ton of other reports globally that are doing the same.
Absolutely. And again, we come back to the sort of, that list of tactics. I put out 6 media releases or whatever.
Yeah.
Did that lead to an increase in sales or inquiries or something? So go that next step and figure out what the benefit was for the business of doing that activity, not just, you ticked a KPI box, basically.
Yep.
Just on AI, as you're saying that, I did notice in the report that about 2/3 of respondents said they are using AI tools, which is really awesome. But I do notice it's mostly at the moment, and this could be a limitation of AI at the moment, they're mostly using it for content creation and automation. But what role do you think AI could play in strategic comms moving forward? I mean, it's a bit of a blue sky right now, but...
Absolutely. It's a bit of a let's see what happens because this is going to change. I'd be really interested to see how this changes over time. And as I said earlier, there are a ton of research reports, and I know that USC Annenberg recently conducted a piece of research around communication and artificial intelligence. And there was actually a similar result. I think it was exactly the same. 60% of communication professionals said they were using AI in some way, shape, or form, which is great. But what the data tells us is there is a lot of untapped potential when it comes to using AI to support internal communication professionals to become more strategic. So things like enhancing our data analysis, gaining deeper audience insights, helping us to segment our audiences, optimizing our communication strategies, helping us create frameworks for measurement, helping us define our objectives. Look, there's a ton of things you can use AI for. I mean, that's just a great start. But it is a good tool to jog the creative juices and get you running in that direction. But we need to be using it too to help us create more strategic internal communication, and particularly for those people who may not have access to formal professional development or don't have a professional development budget. Play around on AI. Ask it to help you define some measurable objectives for your next campaign and see what it comes out with. It can help you get into that strategic frame of thinking and give you a model and a framework for future communication strategies.
Yeah, I love that. For me personally, I'm finding a lot of value in, as you say, getting those creative juices flowing. If it's just, I need to do a bunch of FAQs for this particular project. What are some of the things that leaders are likely to ask? And it's not perfect, but it's a great start, just, especially if I'm just feeling a bit brain dead at the end of a lot of meetings, a long day, and there's just not a lot going on upstairs anymore. It does just help get those juices flowing. And I think for me personally too, the benefit has been because you can use AI to do a lot more of that tedious stuff. You spend less time on the tedious stuff. It frees up the time to spend on the thinking and the meeting with people and doing all those things. So I think there's so much, and it's like you, I'm excited to see what's going to happen because it's changing so quickly and it's never going to be this slow or this dumb again. So Lord knows where it's going to head next, but yeah, it could be scary, could be great, could be a bit both. Yeah. One last question on this before I ask the more interesting questions about you. But what do you think the next steps are for this research?
Well, the next part of this is I want to talk to the organization's leadership. So
Mm,
we've talked to internal communication professionals around demonstrating value, what's preventing them from becoming more strategic and taking a strategic approach to their work. I want to talk to the organization's business leaders and find out their views on the value of internal communication and their internal communication teams. So that will be probably a focus for next year.
yeah, perfect. Well, I'm excited to see the outcome of that. All right, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions I ask every guest on the podcast. Are you ready for those?
Yep.
So hit me. Let's go. What's one of the best communication lessons you've ever learned, and how did it change the way you approach communication?
Okay, so at the start of my senior leadership journey, I was working in an organization. I had a seat at the executive table, which I was very happy about, but I hadn't quite found my voice. And I happened to find myself in an executive meeting. I was sitting around the board table with the executive head and the other execs. And the executive head asked me a question. He asked me for my opinion on a matter as it applied to communication. And while I knew the answer, I wasn't confident enough to articulate it in that moment because I was so focused on self-preservation. What if I sound silly? What if they say no? What if they laugh at me? What if there were a whole bunch of what ifs. Anyway, so I hadn't found my voice. And in that moment, and in front of everybody, probably around, 10, 12 people around the room, he said, I thought you could think on your feet, Sia.
Yes.
And in it was a good lesson. In that moment, I wanted the earth to open and swallow me whole.
I bet.
But from that day on, Mel, I vowed never to walk into a meeting without the confidence to articulate the reason I was there and my opinions, because it's really up to us to build that confidence and be confident in our role at the decision-making table. And I should have reminded myself I was there for a reason. I was there because they trusted me. I knew I was good at my job. I knew how to be strategic, and I didn't believe in myself in that moment. So that was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah, that's a very valuable lesson. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
What's one thing you wish people would do more of or less of when communicating?
One thing I wish people would do more of when communicating is listening. I don't think we listen well. We tend to make a lot of assumptions or jump to conclusions about what somebody needs or expects when it comes to communication. So, particularly internally, one of our stakeholders might come to us with a problem, and instead of asking them some questions, being a little bit more curious and finding out all we can about this particular issue, we tend to go into solution mode. And already, before they've even got the sentence out of their mouth, we think we know how to fix the problem through our communication activity. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Stop focusing on your activity and start focusing on why you do what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah, love it. Audience-centered communication is like my thing. Now, final question. Who do you turn to for communication advice?
I mean, there's not one individual, but it's a group of individuals. So that's about me building a really diverse network. So I have trusted advisors, I have colleagues, I have mentors who challenge my thinking, who help me see things from a different perspective. That includes people on our global faculty, our collaborators, my business partner, even my mother, who is the queen of Greek proverbs and other wise sayings. So she's always a great inspiration. But we have such great peers, and we've got such a great community of communication professionals. And I host a forum once a month. It's called the Spark Forum. And it's just a great opportunity to be really curious and listen to one another. So there's a ton of people I turn to for communication advice.
I love that. Yeah. And I believe for me personally, it's very similar. It's not one person that there's a group of people. And everybody has their own specialties too, right? And their own experiences, their own backgrounds that you can draw on at different times too. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Sia, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Less Chatter, More Matter today. If people want to find out more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best. And I'm open to connecting with everyone on LinkedIn. So if you send me a connection request, I will always accept it.
Oh, lovely. We'll put the link in the show notes. We'll also put the link to the report in there so people can read that for themselves. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Mel. It's been great talking to you.